Welcome to Soundscape and Mindful Meditation, where we explore the transformative power of meditation, sound healing, spirituality, and mindfulness. My name is Amandine, your guide on this journey toward inner balance and harmony. In this podcast, we delve into practices that nourish the soul, elevate the spirit, and cultivate a deeper connection with oneself. Each episode is crafted to bring you moments of tranquility, whether you're seeking relaxation, stress relief, or a pathway to self discovery. In today's episode, I have a very special guest with us, Cylvia Hayes. Cylvia is a name some of you might recognize as she served as the First Lady of Oregon with grace and dedication. Now, she embraces a new path as a minister at the Unity Church. There, she continues to inspire and uplift others through her profound spiritual insights and compassionate leadership. In our conversation today, Cylvia will share her remarkable journey from her time in public service to her current role in spiritual ministry. Together, we'll explore the lessons she's learned, the challenges she's faced, and the wisdom she gained along the way. So sit back, relax, and open your heart to the waves of wisdom that Cylvia Hayes brings to our podcast. Well, hello, everyone. And thank you so much, Cylvia Hayes, for joining us today on this podcast episode. I think it's going to be very interesting. I have a lot of really cool questions about mindfulness, meditation, your whole path, which was, I think, very interesting and that we all have a lot to learn from. And also, obviously, because I was a climate nerd, we'll definitely merge onto that topic at some point. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. Yeah, just got
Beautiful.
back from practicing agility with my dog, and that is my current addiction. So that's always fun. Yes.
Nice. For our listener who may not be familiar with you, your background, could you share what initially drew you to a life of spiritual teaching? I should have mentioned in my introduction about you that I met you through the Unity Church, and you're a reverend there, and you do beautiful lectures. Should I call that
Talks,
um,
Sunday
talks?
talk. Sure.
Can you give us a little background?
I can. Actually grew up a rough little farm kid up in the foothills of Washington State. My whole family was from Oklahoma, Arkansas, very conservative and very fundamentalist Christian. And I was raised in a pretty hellfire brimstone version of Christianity that just did not jive with me. And I eventually really just completely rebelled from it in my mid to late teens. But I've always been a spiritual seeker. And when I did um, walk away from Christianity, which was a difficult thing to do, it was like leaving a cult when because it's that kind of indoctrination. We can come back to that if you have an interest. But that's when I really began exploring, and indigenous pathways and goddess religion and Wiccan stuff and Buddhist stuff and all kinds of stuff. And I I first became aware of Unity. I think it's been about 25 years ago now when I first got to Central Oregon. Um, but I didn't really take it all that seriously. And then, well, however, I was pretty much a pretty regular spiritual practitioner. I got a meditation practice in place that was quite regular and whatnot, which was such a godsend because about 10 years ago, my life blew. I was in a public position. I was First Lady of Oregon at the time, partner to the governor. And my life blew up in a really big and spectacular fashion. I was publicly shamed for a couple of years. Lots of stuff went down during that time, and it just about broke me and wound up breaking me open. And
Mm.
um, it was through that process of coming through that really really deepened my own spiritual practice. And I did not set out to say I have some huge calling to become a Unity minister. I was actually taking a bunch of the classes for my own healing. And the senior minister, Jane Hyatt, was like, well, maybe you should think about the ministerial path. And at that point, I was still very broken and just like overwhelmed. But I was like, well, I might as well be getting credit for these because I'm taking a lot of them. And then one thing led to another. And the deeper in I got, the more it was like, yeah, I want to be part of that movement. And it seems to make sense to me.
Beautiful. Uh, Your you mentioned something that's very interesting for me because I experienced the complete opposite, that you grew up in a world where religion was really important. You mentioned it to be like almost like a cult. It
Mm-hmm.
must be so uh, you must be so brave and very curious to a level that I could not understand. For me, my family was atheist or anti-religion, and I was like, "Well, I believe in God, and I want to be a nun." So it was kind of like, "Oh, okay, just, sure, you do you, boo." But
Oh, that's so
yeah,
funny.
so I didn't have that, family of like, "Oh my God, you should not," or that were. So I would be really interesting to hear that perspective of being willing and wanting to discover other way of reaching to the sacred, I would call it.
Mm-hmm.
How did that work for you?
That's really well said. And yeah, I'll be very direct too. I believe that the do- dogmatic organized religion, especially that is based in the concept of original sin, um, is unbelievably psychologically damaging. And I think the fact that I am a minister at all shows that Great Spirit has a tremendous sense of humor. Um, and part of my quote ministry is helping to unravel that Christian shadow, that very damaging and disempowering version of religion. I think what really was my true north was nature. I mean, I was just born an animal lover and a nature lover, and the way we were raised, we spent a lot of time alone out in nature, and that really was my church from a
Mm.
pretty early age and continues to be. And so I would, as you put it so well, experience the sacred there. I've always had a sense that we are spiritual beings beyond just these bodies, and that all creatures are spiritual beings currently in some sort of a physical body. Um, and I just had a curiosity about it. And truthfully, I've had a number of um, mystical experiences where the boundaries between my physical body, my physical senses would slide away, and I felt the connection to the vastness, the connection to the all of creation. And that to me spoke of there's more out there than just this physical realm.
Okay. I like the way you're explaining it. And that shows. I like your vision because it's kind of like how I understand it, and I really appreciate that you're bringing nature and all the other creature of this planet into your understanding of the sacred and not just humans. I think that it's something that a lot of people have forgotten, that we're one element of a large, very enriched world, and we're not above it, we're a part fully of it. So thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, I
Um
fully I fully agree. That's actually been I am by training, by education, training, and profession, I'm a professional environmentalist and an economic system change person. That's what all my, degrees and everything were in and what my career has been in. And it has always dovetailed with my spiritual belief. So I truly believe now. I mean, my personal mission statement now is to do whatever I can to help heal the insanity of humanity, starting with my own, so that all of creation can thrive. And the
mm,
main element of that insanity is a separation consciousness. And there certainly is a human arrogance. We live in a culture that's very much based in the belief that humans are a part from rather than a part of
Mm.
all the rest of nature. And to come full spiral, to the previous question, part of that is because we are existing in a culture that is primarily shaped by Western Christendom. And even in mainstream Christendom, there is the passage in Genesis, it's called the Dominion Scripture, where God allegedly tells humans to go out and subdue and, have dominion over all the other creatures. Well, you put a metaphysical spin on that, and what that really is suggesting is that we are supposed to go inward and gain dominion over our own thoughts and feelings and self mastery, etc. So that's a eco spirituality is a huge part of my ministry. It's why it's the main reason I got into it, and a niche of mine is helping to elevate that side of things within the New Thought movement.
Mm. I like this. What do you I guess we can jump on this part right now. Was planning to ask you about it, but so we do have that shared interest for climate. You just mentioned it. I worked for 5 or 6 years in trying to pass legislation in Oregon to help that, and it was also something very dear to my heart. And when you work in that realm, you understand how bad the situation is, and
Mm-hmm.
how we are completely disconnected from our mission and our responsibility toward our planet. And so you, who is obviously working in the spiritual realm, have learned a lot and experienced a lot in your career. And comparing with like the work on climate, how do you feel those aspects are connected, if they are connected at all for you?
Well, first and foremost, I would say that being a professional environmentalists are badasses. We have to you know this, because you have to be able to sit in the knowledge of what we're losing and how big the problem really is, and be able to not succumb to despair, because that is completely disempowering and won't solve anything. So, one dovetail between those two things is the tools gained through a spiritual practice, meditation, going into the silence, gaining heightened ability to become aware of and redirect our thinking and our feelings. Those are critical components for resiliency, for working in field, whether it's environment or human trafficking, whatever, for for working in fields that are hard, right?
Hmm.
Those are really critical. So there's the overlap there. And then beyond that, for me, uh it's all sacred. All of creation is sacred and spiritual. I believe that I am a spiritual being having a human experience. I believe my little dog Olive is a spiritual being having a canine experience, and on and on and on. So that's all very spiritual work for me. And I think, again, helping to challenge and unravel this human exceptionalism that tells us that humans are the only species that matter. For me, that is spiritual work.
Hmm. So how do you think, for people who are listening right now and want to do something but are not really sure what to do and where they can start, um, probably saying that it starts with us and how we're feeling inside, how would you say, and what advice would you tell the people listening and wanting to help the climate? How, what would be the guidance that you suggest to them at a personal level, and around them?
Sure. Where I would really go with that, and I differ a little. So, within the bulk of the environmental movement, there are kind of two different lanes. And the environment and climate movement. One is that we simply need to, as quick as we can, make a full scale investment in renewables transition everything over to renewable energy, etc. I'm not in that lane. I'm in the lane that says we need to fundamentally redesign the economic system because it is based on consumption and extraction at a rate that the planet cannot regenerate, right? So I am in the we need to get beyond this cultural sacred cow of limitless economic growth. You cannot have limitless growth on a finite planet. That I've been tilting that windmill for a long time, but it's just truth. And that movement is quite large. I mean, the whole shift to a beyond limitless growth movement has got major traction and whatnot. We can come back to that. And then on an individual basis, one of the most radical things we can do and one of the most helpful things we can do is just check the impulse to buy, 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 buy. You know, we're fed that message all the time, and it's really hard not to because we swim in a culture that drives us to feel inadequate so that we'll buy more shit. Period. That's what we're swimming in. This is Western consumerism, right? We're called consumers rather than citizens. I encourage people, if you're feeling the need for retail therapy, it really is, what is the gap that we're trying to fill, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I really like to take it to that level. I mean, yeah, you can get a hybrid car or an electric car. I've got a hybrid car. I do the best I can. It's I still drive. I'm still part of the problem for sure. um, I also though have a, a small house, and I am kind of, everyone is a consumer, of course, in this culture, but I buy secondhand whenever I can. Um, and I don't buy a lot. I don't buy a lot of stuff. I don't even really usually give stuff for gifts. I give experiences for gifts. So I think more and more, the more that people can become conscious of the programming that we are fed from the womb to buy, 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 the better.
I love what you just shared. I mean, it's nice to hear the words from somebody else sometimes because it's in your head and you're like, "Oh my god, am I annoying?" And so when you have the validation from someone else, it's like, no, okay, we really, yeah, it's in here, and we need to pay attention to that part. Yes.
Yeah, yeah. And it's, you definitely often feel like you're, like I use the term tilting windmills because the cultural pressure is so extraordinary. The marketing machine that we're in. Um, but there are lots and lots and lots and lots and lots of us who realize we're in an insane system and we're working for something better.
True. Something that I really appreciated that you mentioned is that we go on a shopping therapy, because that's what we've been told basically to do, by movies, by magazines. I
Right.
mean, it's a billion-dollar industry telling us like this is a quick way for you to get better. And you mentioned, like, when we want to do that, it's important to look inward and what are we trying to feel with it, within. Sorry, what is that parachute is trying to solve inside. And so going inward, doing meditation, breath work can be a really good way for us to potentially start to have the answer of like what is that void that I'm trying to fill inside.
Yes. Mhm.
And so I want to ask you, um what strategies would you recommend from someone looking to embrace meditation or embrace like a sustainable practice like this so that they can start to accept themselves as they are, and figure out those questions that needs to be addressed instead of continuing to use solutions that are not solutions, at least not on the long term, and that would be more in alliance with the shape of the earth.
I think I know where you're coming from. So I will say, if people don't have a regular meditation practice on board, get one yesterday. When I am not kidding you, and I wrote this in my book. I really think, having had a pretty darn established meditation practice, is one of the couple of things that may have saved my life when the whole blow up and public shaming and all of that was going on, because my mind, with the fear and the anger, was so intense, and my mind was just spinning around it, replaying snippets of conversation, replaying scenes, replaying. I mean, I think I was temporarily insane in a
Mm.
genuine way. And I am a phenomenal sleeper, thank goodness. I have been my whole life, but not then. Not I couldn't shut it down. And the only way that I could really um sort of calm my mind. I tried to do it with mindless television at times. Just like check. Just I was just trying to check out. Didn't really work. The only thing that did work was kind of meditation. I had at least had enough mindfulness muscles to be able to observe what I was doing to myself internally, be able to observe and redirect. And then about oh 6, 8, 9 months into it, I started into my big. I used to call it my big ordeal. I now call it my big initiation. 8 or 9 months in, I started working with A Course in Miracles, and we can come back to that. But that, very difficult for me at first because of the language, et cetera, et cetera. But there was some truth that spoke to me. And one of the wonderful little practical nuggets in A Course in Miracles is this tool to say, choose again, choose again. I'd find my mind, replaying some scenario of running over one of the reporters who was spreading lies, and I'd be like, "Oh, Syl, that's insane. Choose again, choose again." And sometimes I'd have to do it 500 times, but eventually it would shift. So that's a
Mm.
great one. And it's not beat yourself up, "Oh, you silly fool, choose again." It's like, choose again. There goes little Sylvia sacrificing her peace. Choose again.
Mm. I like
So
that.
and I think another thing that is important for people, meditation doesn't have to be you sit in lotus position for an hour. It really ha- being diligent with it is important, lengthening out the time that you can meditate. But once you kind of, I have found, for myself and others that I've worked with, once you kind of get the basics of it, you can pull it in more regularly and even fleetingly. You can pull it in when you start to get angry at the guy who cuts you off in traffic. It's coming into bringing your awareness back to the present moment,
Mm.
noticing when you're feeling some discord, and realizing that you have the power to actually shift that feeling.
Nice. Yes. You did mention that you wrote a book, When Life Blows Up,
Mm-hmm.
and it offers like a very interesting exploration of personal resilience. And I wanted to, you mentioned it earlier, so I wanted to ask you, you obviously have a very unique experience. Um, when I was, working on our interview, I thought about it, and to me, it's like the ultimate bullying, but not on the school level where you have like 30 kids, that are coming after you, where you have people who have a public, important voice coming after you on everything that you do. So I cannot begin to imagine what it is, but your experience, to me anyway, feels like the ultimate way to find inner strength and resilience. Because if you are able to overcome that kind of hard, step and blossom to become, a spiritual leader, why? My question is,
did you write your book, and what was so special about writing your book in, in that environment that you were in, and that unique, having to pull, resilience from deep within?
Yeah, well, for your listeners, let me give a little bit more of the backstory so that it makes more
Sure.
sense. So, the and I'm very much an open book about all of this. What happened is the governor and I had served in those positions for 4 years. He was running for reelection. A reporter who had been trying to find dirt on me for many years discovered that I had been involved in a green card marriage years and years and years prior, was to
Mhm.
put myself through college and to allow the guy to be able to stay here on a education visa himself. Used that um, what they called misdeed from my past to launch. So political opponents then, in cahoots with several of the media, affiliated media, they used the misdeeds from my past to launch a campaign of false allegations that the governor and I had misused our public positions for personal gain. And we were investigated for like 2 years by the IRS, FBI, Department of Justice, all of it, who came back and said there's nothing here to file charges about. But by that time, damage totally done. The governor got reelected anyway, despite all of this going on, but resigned a couple months later under the ongoing onslaught of pressure from political opponents, etc. So that's the lowdown. And so for me, um, gosh, I haven't even talked about this in so long. I've so moved on, but um, it
Good.
was it was so intense. The guilt was unbelievably intense because I had compartmentalized that little period of my life where I did the green card marriage and whatnot. Uh, I never even thought about it. When that reporter was trying to find dirt about me in the previous election, I never once thought, oh my God, he's going to discover the green card marriage, right? I had so compartmentalized it off, but I had made, John didn't even know about it. My partner didn't even know about it. Um, and I made a terrible mistake of naivety by getting into such a high profile position without being completely transparent about my past. Because if we had just led with that, if I just put it out there, it would
Mm.
have just been a blip, right? So that rattled me. That whole experience rattled my own sense of identity because
Mm.
I thought I was pretty savvy. I thought I was pretty smart. Um, I thought, and then here I am. I had blown something up that was so big. It was so much bigger than I was, and I was sitting, and then they take the narrative, they being the media. I could not believe how much misinformation the media can get away with. And
Mm.
if you're a public figure, which is loosely defined, you have almost no recourse. And so the whole thing shattered my sense of my own identity. It was completely disillusioning about media and the political system and all of that. So it was a dark, dark night. And I said in the book, I believe, we in this culture use dark night of the soul too flippantly because it's not just a little challenge, I believe. It's not just a temporary depression. It's experiencing something that is prolonged and that rattles the very foundations of what you think you believe and who you think you are. It's
Mm.
intense. There's a term I learned when I first heard about this. When I was in the middle of this, I just cried because I applied it to me and I so didn't want to be in it. But it's called the liminal phase. Liminal, like limbo, right? Same root. And the liminal phase originated in anthropology, in cultures where, let's say, at a certain age, all the young boys get taken away
Mm.
from the tribe, or the young girls, whatever. They get stripped from their identities. Sometimes even their name gets taken away. They go through some initiation. And when they come back, they're given a new role in society. Well, liminality now also is used in psychology because it happens to us when something major happens, the death of a loved one or a terminal diagnosis, where we get stripped of the position and the roles that we had, and we don't know what's going to replace it on the other side. It's a really challenging place psychologically for a human to be, and that's where I was. So that's a long-winded backdrop. To your point about resiliency, I believe the thing that really, and I've been open about this, I came as close to ending my own life as I ever had in this life, for sure, because it seemed like what I was going to have to go through to come through it was just too hard. It was just too big. But I couldn't pile that on John, my partner, and I couldn't do it to my dog at the time. That's the truth. It was kind of like I couldn't envision that. I probably wasn't as close as I felt like I was. Honestly, I don't think I'm kind of wired for that. But I will tell you now, I get it. Why young people, when they go through a public shaming, why the suicide rate is high with that. We are hardwired to be in tribe. And when you get exiled, it is a visceral feeling. What helped me, is I knew my true north. First of all, I knew what we had and hadn't done. So first of all, I had a strong sense that we weren't going to be charged with anything because I knew we hadn't done what we were being accused of. I also knew that while I had been definitely imperfect and much more ego-driven than I had realized, my motives were good. I mean, I knew that. I knew my true north. I was in that position for no money, working hard for the planet and trying to prevent poverty. I mean, I felt pretty good about that. And then I also had some of the basic tools of, mindfulness, meditation, getting out into nature. I kept my exercise going, even when sometimes I did not want to, and I was afraid of running into people in public. I kept it going. Those things were essential. And here's a great one. I also, however, knew that I was in really deep psychologically and that I needed help. And I had done a lot of therapy before. I wound up with a therapist who did EMDR, eye movement desensitization and reprogramming. It was for me. It really was. And I got into that early. I started doing that even before John resigned. I was doing that when we were still in those positions. So those things up front really, really, really helped. And then I just allowed myself to be worked on from the inside out as we went through the whole long process. Many phases of it.
Sorry about that.
That's okay.
Don't you love when you're being, you record something and you start to have a need to. Thank you so much for sharing all this and being transparent about it and authentic. I wanted to ask you another major element that I think you teach about is the theme of forgiveness. How do you guide individuals or yourself in the process of forgiving others, the world, or even yourself? What is that process looking like? And
Yeah, that was a big one. I have shared this. There's a whole chapter in my book about it, and it threads through the whole thing. I could not believe how much hatred and even violence that I had within me, to be really honest, because I would literally fantasize. I would catch myself fantasizing about doing real harm to the handful of people who had really put this in place and who were really spreading the lies. I found myself wishing that the main reporter that created this whole mess would be discovered to have been a pedophile. I was recognizing because I wanted him to be put through what he had kicked off that I was going through. I recognized the insanity of that even as I was thinking it. But the truth is, I was thinking it, and I had to be honest about that. And one of the things that helped me with is it gave me just a crack of an opening to realize there is in me some of that real ugliness that they are demonstrating. There is in me too, right? The other thing, this is where working with A Course in Miracles at the early part of this, it was just like, you have to be kidding, because A Course in Miracles literally, it's hugely about forgiveness. And it teaches that actually attack is an illusion. The only one that can crucify us is ourselves, and that there really is no such thing as enemy. And in fact, what we deem enemy, they are in fact our saviors. I was like, get the F out. That guy is not my savior, right? That guy is evil, and I would like to see him hurt. And yet, I knew I really didn't want to put more hurt into the world. I knew that. I knew that there was something in me that knew if I stayed that attached to the hatred, they still had the power. I had to take back the crucifying ability that I was giving them. And I had to recognize they can't crucify the truth of me. Now, I worked a lot on forgiveness during all of that. There's a wonderful book, I think it's called The Book of Forgiving by Desmond Tutu and his daughter Mafo. And there's a wonderful kind of prayer before the prayer of forgiving. It's like, I'm not ready. I can't go there yet, but I someday will. For me, and A Course in Miracles says you just have to be willing. Well, I recognized I wasn't actually willing to forgive, because if I forgave them, if I let them off the hook, was I then on the hook for the ginormous mess running through my life and my loved ones' lives? If they're not to blame, am I to blame? You know what? It's like, it felt like this completely unjustified gift to forgive them. And yet I could sense the truth of holding a grievance against somebody is like drinking rat poison, expecting them to die, right? These people didn't even know I was hating them, but I knew, right? So I had to start with, okay, great spirit, highest self, whatever you want to call it. I'm not really willing, but I know I want to become willing. I had to start with like, I'm willing to become willing. And eventually I willed it so. Eventually I was actually like, yeah, I'm willing now. I'm ready for the release. I'm ready for the liberation.
Was there a specific thing that happened that allowed you to feel that shift? Or was it just like day after day, practice after practice, going back to it?
I think it was the more gradual. I probably was cumulative. You know, it was day after day. It was doing my spiritual work. And bear in mind, at this time, it was the first, I had all day long to do my spiritual work, because it was the first time in my life that I couldn't just pick things back up and get going again. I couldn't get my business going. We were under investigation. I was radioactive. No one was going to work with me, blah, blah, blah. And then at some point I realized I was too broken to even try to do it. That was the truth. That was the first time in my life that I stopped working and allowed myself to be worked on. So this whole process then truly was like my full-time job. And so there was a lot, I'm sorry, I'm rambling a bit, but the forgiveness piece, I didn't have a specific, oh yes, the light bulb has gone on. It was more gradual release. I was able to catch the feelings of hatred more quickly and let them go. And then pretty soon a whole day went by and I wasn't thinking about the assholes. You know, I mean, that's the truth. You know, it's just kind of like, oh, that's great. And then honestly, then it got to the point where, and this was many years into it, it got to the point where I really kind of gained a confidence in, I seriously doubt that a whole bunch of the guys who piled on this whole big attack could have weathered it as well as I have.
Hmm.
I really did get to that point, and it was kind of like, okay, all right, I know what I'm about.
And that's such a beautiful moment when you come back from all that storm and you finally see the sun, so to speak, that finally the sky is shining. And I mean, tell me if I'm wrong, but it feels like you're probably so the sunshine, brighter than any time before because you must have built so much inner strength to come through.
100%. 100%. And I would say, if I were to run into the handful of people who really were the key conductors of the whole thing, I think I would be pretty gracious. I really do. I think it would be not much of a charge.
Nice.
Um, I'm checking in to make sure I'm telling you the truth. Yeah, I think so. There's still a part of me as I say that I would still kind of like to one up them a little bit. But yeah, I just don't think about them, that's the sunshine, really.
Yes.
Yeah.
And talking about the sunshine and, being brighter once you pass that today. So you do regular talks about very different spiritual topics. And could you tell us which spiritual traditions or practices influence your teaching? You mentioned that when you were, younger, you studied many different pagan and
Mhm.
native traditions. Do they impact you today when you work on a new talk or a new spiritual project, or is it something else?
Yeah, that's hard to even deconstruct because my spirituality is very eclectic. So, um, unity is within the whole New Thought movement, and that is can be quite broad. What I would say, the fundamentals for me, I don't even like using that word now that I think about it. Um, New Thought is non-dualistic. So, and I am going to directly answer your question with this. It's non-dualistic. It doesn't believe that there is a God deity out there somewhere separate from us that we have to beseech to, or that's waiting to punish us, etc. New Thought also, I'm not very Bible centric in my own teaching, but some New Thought is. Very importantly, New Thought does not believe that Jesus was the one and only child of God and the only Christ. The unity does, and New Thought do not teach that Jesus is an unattainable exception, but that he was a human being who so awakened to his divinity and to spiritual truth that he embodied Christ consciousness. And so he is actually an exceptional example that we all can get to. So that, and then the other really key thing about New Thought is that it's about our thoughts. It teaches that our thinking, Libby, stop. Our thinking has power over our experience in this life, and we have the ability to gain dominion over our thinking and our feeling. So those are fundamental for me. I really believe that. I have animism in my practices, so I believe that animals have their own spiritual thing going on as well. If I'm out on a hike and a raven lands next to me, I'm gonna be like, huh, what's the animal medicine of raven, right? There's
Hmm.
messages there. Now, do I know for sure? No, but does it enrich my life to play with that? You bet. And because I have such a nature consciousness anyway, so in those areas, I have an altar that I light in the evening that has um, the feminine and the masculine. And then I also change it for the turning of the seasons and the four directions. So my faith is eclectic. I believe that all creation is sacred. I believe that we are expressions or extensions of the creator. I tend to view, quote, God more like the Star Wars force than an entity now. It's more about getting aligned with this creative force. Um, so that's the gist of it. I do meditate pretty much daily, at least for a little bit in the mornings. Sometimes not if I'm traveling, but pretty regularly. And it's usually not some big prolonged thing. The mornings here, it's usually out in my little hot tub outside. And one thing that I've had to discipline myself with, um, I'll have different little devotionals, or I'll have the Course in Miracles or whatever to do a little reading in the morning. And I've really stopped doing that because I found that I could be out there my whole morning practice time reading and not really go inside, not really go into the silence myself. So I've been, for the last several months, I've been not bringing the reading out. It's just going into the silence,
Mm,
stilling my mind, setting intention for the day. That's been a good phase for me lately.
nice. And I really appreciate that basically twice you mentioned something a little playful in your daily spiritual practice, which I found very interesting. I mean, when I say playful, the fact that you're bringing Star Wars in how you're seeing spirituality, I kind of agree with you. I think that there is a lot to draw from in that movie and the Jedi mindset, and also that you do your meditation in your hot tub. That, for
Yeah.
me, it's like a playful environment to bring spirituality. So thank you so much for just bringing the playfulness. I feel like it's such an undervalued aspect of us, especially in the spiritual sphere.
I 100% agree with you. I've actually done two talks on the metaphysics of Star Wars. They're on my YouTube page. That was super fun. I really agree. I'm even playing with not saying spiritual work or doing the work. I'm playing with calling it play because I think that I'm a very driven person. I would say, like, leaning toward workaholic for sure. The more I can release that a little bit and stay in playfulness, the better. And I swear, I sometimes feel creator smiling about that. I think being in joy, being in a positive expression, that's extending creators joy and positive expression, right? So that's a sense for me. Keep it lighter. The other thing that's so cool about, for me, again, I'm nature girl, so what's so awesome about my little hot tub on my deck is my backyard is alive with wildlife and birds and everything else. So I'm in the cacophony of that sound and of their activity. And that's really, really speaks to my soul.
Beautiful. um so knowing what you know now, what piece of advice would you give to your younger self at the beginning of your spiritual journey?
Ooh.
Hmm.
Well, I'd have to define the beginning of my spiritual journey. Um, I think for me I'm going to, when I did leave the hellfire brimstone Christian path. Um, I had, I mean, I call it cult like because it is. When you're taught from birth, basically, that Satan is a real thing, an entity, just kind of lurking around, ready to grab you and doom you to hell. And you walk away from that. I mean, I've spoken with so many people who've been through this. I had a few months there where I had moments of terror. It's
Mm.
like, I'm studying these other paths, and I'm, studying Native American things and things that my mom considered satanic at the time. So I think I would speak to that person and just encourage her to have the courage, encourage her that, Satan's not going to grab her, that hell's a state of consciousness, I would encourage, because that was like totally foreign thinking to me at that point. I
Mm.
would encourage her there. Um, uh, and then a little further forward, once I kind of had moved past that, if I were able to talk to my older but still younger than I am now self, I would have encouraged her ahead of time to gain insight into how ego driven she was being. And by
Mm.
that I don't mean ego in just arrogant or whatever, because that's not what I'm talking about. That's not how I was. But what my public shaming experience showed me is that I had a level of insecurity that was way beyond what I would have acknowledged. I
Mm.
really needed outside validation to feel valuable. And I had been good at getting it my whole life through different ways. Um, and then it was gone. Then not only was I not getting validated, I was being demonized, and even the great work that I had done was being credited to others and invalidated. It
Mm.
was like the perfect crucible, right? So
Wow.
if I had been way more aware of my egoic self, I don't think I would have made the choices that enabled that whole big public thing to happen. I really, and then you have to step back too, because I think in some way, on a spiritual level, I helped put that whole thing in play because I was ready to take that growth. And I don't think that I could have seen the depth of my egoic attachment had I not been put through something like that. And those are things we'll never know until we, get to the point where we can just beam off the planet because we're so evolved, I guess. But I definitely would have um, counseled her
Mm.
to gain a recognition of just how much she was seeking external validation and begin the process earlier, working on validating myself.
Beautiful. Beautifully said. Thank you. Um, I have two questions to finish our beautiful conversation. My first one is we're in an increasingly digitized world. Sorry, I'm not an English native speaker, so
That's
sometimes
all
I
right.
say
You do
things
great.
weirdly. What impact do you think will uh, that will have on the practice, of spirituality as we go more and more in that digital realm? You mentioned a few times, wanting to be fully connected to nature, that it is very important. But as we, have more and more digital walls, basically, are you more hopeful, or a little afraid, or in between?
Well, I think it's a mixed bag, I mean, I teach a lot of online spiritual classes. That's awesome. I get to work with people or play with people from all across the country and beyond, even that wouldn't happen otherwise. And we have really deep, like revelatory conversations, and we form real connections. And I'm kind of I me personally, on the spectrum, I'm more anti-tech or not very tech savvy. Now that's been changing quite a bit. um but I still am not, like, yeah. um I am concerned about things like the confirmation bias silos in news. I'm more concerned about that than people losing connection, because I do think it's really important. Like, I don't take my cell phone with me when I go hiking. or running, unless I'm going somewhere really tricky and my partner's freaked out in case I fall off a cliff. But I keep the sound off. I won't
Mm.
look at it. I won't take phone calls, etc. And sometimes that takes some discipline. I find myself, because we're all getting that dopamine hit, right? So I think it's really important that we balance it, that we take time to unplug, that we use the tools of technology like we're doing right now in this
Hmm.
interview, that we use them well. And I think we need to really
Be mindful.
mindful and use discernment,
Mm.
because we're also in this age of AI and things. And I mean, at night, late at night, here's one of my probably too much information things. When I've done all the work I can, whatever, I will dial up, because I told you I'm an addict. I will dial up YouTube and look at dog agility vids or animal vids. And I swear now, over just the last maybe 6 or 8 months, probably, I see things come through that I'm like, I don't think that's real. I think that's AI
Mm.
concocted, you know? So I don't do as much of that YouTubing thing now because I'm not even sure it's real.
Yeah.
So though that's that we're in uncharted territory with some of this. That was not
Very
a very
true.
good answer. My short answer is jury's out for me. I think we can use it very positively and powerfully. I think it's really important to step away from it, to notice when we're becoming addicted or acting addicted to it, and to really just get into the silence, get into nature, get off the technology. It's got to be a bit of both. That's my
No,
take.
I really appreciate your answer. That there is truth to it, can be a beautiful resource. It's just like being self-aware of, am I starting to get too much in it? Um, when I see certain people, they're in the street or at the restaurant, the kid is pulling the shirt, and the parent is on the phone, like, wait, I'm trying to watch the final,
Yeah.
picture or content, whatever. It's like, okay, you need to be more self-aware that of the situation. The Everyone needs to be aware of the situation that they're in, and realize, okay, is it detrimental to my own well-being, or is it a positive tool? So no, thank you so much for the what you shared with us. I really think that it's a good answer and a good balance.
I would add one thing based on
Mhm.
what you just said. There's also a courtesy, I think. Like, I will not talk on my cell phone or look at my cell phone when I'm going through the bank drive through. Or here in Oregon, we have people who pump our gas. We're weird and I love that.
Yes.
Or when I won't do that when I'm working, when the person there is servicing, putting gas in my car, because I feel like that's treating people. I will not do it going through a checkout line in a store. I see it all the time. But for me, that feels like I'm treating a person like a vending machine.
Mm.
So I just don't. I want to be open to the possibility of having a really nice interaction with that person in that little moment. So I just dropped that in there.
Thank you. Yeah, that's true. I use the idea of a kid, but that's also very true on a day to day with anybody that we encounter. Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah.
To finish, I wanted to ask you, what are you currently working on that is exciting for you, and what can we look forward to seeing you in next? What is your big thing?
Yeah, thanks. So, not only am I associate minister at Unity Spiritual Community Central Oregon, but I have my own nonprofit organization. It's called the Rethink Ministry, and it is a place that it's a blend of environment issues, environment, climate, economic system change, this whole eco consciousness piece, and new thought spirituality. One piece out of that, I'm a writer and a speaker, primarily writer, speaker, teacher, primarily. And I have a publication on Substack called Transcend, which is a love of mine. And it's where
Mm.
I write, I'm kind of a cultural commentator. I write about environment, climate issues. some political stuff, and also everything from A Course in Miracles to New Thought. So it's designed for people who kind of want both lanes. So I'd love to have people check that out. That would be a place to start. And then a big idea that I'm hatching. I'm not quite sure what I'm going to do with this, but the big idea is a TV series that is that tells a whole different story about the apocalypse, because we have a lot of apocalyptic stuff going right now, right? And it's almost all of it is violent, and it shows humanity devolving to our baser selves. I'm looking at a different spin on that.
Ooh, that's interesting. I'll make sure to put all the links of your letter, your website, and also you mentioned your Star Wars.
Yeah.
So I will put all the links in the description below for anybody who is interested in checking all of that out. And I'm definitely curious to see that show coming up.
Yeah,
That's
that would be,
awesome.
yes, I'll keep you informed for sure. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you so much. What a beautiful conversation we had.
As we wrap up this enlightening episode, I want to extend a heartfelt thank you to Cylvia Hayes for sharing her incredible journey with us. Her story is a testament to the power of resilience, faith, and the unwavering quest for personal and spiritual growth. To each one of you listening, thank you for joining us today. If Cylvia insights have resonated with you, make sure to check her website, her book, and subscribe to her empowering and informative eco newsletter. And if you crave more stories that inspire and transform, don't forget to click the follow or subscribe button. By doing so, you'll be the first to know when our next episode goes live, featuring more incredible guests and profound conversations. For more resources, including guided meditation or community support, make sure to visit me at amandinelrh.com, where I am here to support you on your path to well-being and a purposeful living. And just as well, if you resonated with Cynthia's and want to subscribe to her wonderful and empowering newsletter, eco newsletter, make sure to check out the links that are in the description below this episode. Thank you again for tuning in. And until next time, stay grounded, keep shining, and remember, your journey is just beginning. This is Amandine, your host, signing off.